For the final part of this week, I would like to trace the three methods that we defined in the previous video. We want to debug specifically test number 3, and also we want to see how the getFacilityUnits work, and also how the extendFacilityUnits methods works, and also the private helper method that both methods call. And we also want to see, want to step into and see how that works precisely. So what I will do is I'm going to trace as usual both on the paper and also on the debugger synchronously. So I will put a breakpoint over here in the first line of test 3, and then I'm going to launch the debugger over here. If you simply click on the debug button here and make sure it's test member we are debugging. Okay, if you click on that and then switch to debug perspective, and then you will actually see that we're actually pausing at test 1A simply because we had a previous breakpoint set up over here. So what you can do is we can simply stop the debugger here, and then if you simply click on the breakpoints tab over here, you can see we got many previous breakpoint here. What you can do is you can simply maybe just remove this particular one. Or if you just want to clean it and start from scratch, you can simply click on the double crosses over here to remove all the breakpoint. That's what I will do. Okay, I don't need to keep any previous breakpoints. I can simply say remove. All right, let me set it again. Let me go back to test 3, and then let me put a breakpoint over here, the first line. Okay, and let me launch the debugger once more. Okay. Yeah, always remember to really clear all the breakpoints. Otherwise, you may be stopping earlier than you intend to pause. Okay. So now we got test number 3, we got F1, F2, F3 to be created, and then we can simply step over, and then we're going to create a new member objects. Let me just go to the variables panel here, and then we're going to step over to create here the member objects, and then we're going to add in F1, F2, F3, right? F1, F2, F3, right? And then I'll pause over here. And then you can see that if you expand the object here over here, you can see the various attributes over here. But these are not relevant to our discussion just yet. Not yet. Actually, I wouldn't really cover the balance for this tutorial here. So you can feel free to define new methods to update this attribute. I'll leave that to you. But what's relevant for the current discussion would be, you can see NOF is currently 3 because we have added in 3 facility objects. And also, most importantly, if you expand the facilities array, you can see we got 0, 1, and 2 over here. We got 3 objects over here. And we also got some expressions showing the aliasing. For example, if you simply try get facility, oh, you know what? We haven't got it yet. Okay, so the facilities currently is still simply just private unless you define some public accessor to it. That's something I'll leave that to you. Okay, so we wouldn't do that now. Okay. All right, so I would encourage you to really look at the facilities over here. You can even try to really make sure the address over here, for example, 0 over here, this address really matches the address for F1. All right, you can see if I click between this and this, you can see there's no change on this part over here. So that means they have matching address. So that's something we visualized already in the previous video. Alright, so far so good. And then before I go any further about getFacilityUnits, let me just switch to the diagram quickly. Okay. So what we have just gone over in the debugger was this particular part. So you can see this particular part over here. We are done. This part over here. Okay, and then we are very quickly. So we got index 0 points to over here. Index 1 points to over here. Index 2 points to over here. Should be no surprise to you. And also NOF is equal to 3. So that means conceptually NOF is pointing to the next index to store a new facility objects, right? So you can see beyond NOF, starting from NOF, we got all the null slots over here, meaning that you should not invoke any methods or attributes directly on this particular null slot. Otherwise, you'll get null pointer exception. That's what we said in the previous video. All right, so now let's move on to really trace further. And for the member class, I included all the relevant attributes over here. And also, you can see I got getFacilityUnits, which calls this particular helper method. And also, we got extendFacilityUnits, also calls the same helper method. And this is the helper method that we have to call in both public methods. Let's now try to trace. Okay, let's now start with this line over here. So we're gonna say here hyang.getFacilityUnits over here, right? You can see the context object is hyang over here. That's the context objects, and this is the arguments, right? So we're going to call the getFacilityUnits over here, and then the context object is simply just hyang context objects. So that means every occurrence of this is going to be replaced by hyang. In this case, we only got just this over here, so that'll be hyang. So you can see having the this explicitly spelled out in your program is actually very useful for tracing. Okay, we're going to see how we do that. And then also for the input argument is going to be Jim. So that means every occurrence of the name is going to be Jim. Okay, and then let's now try to step in to this particular helper method call, right? So now how do we call this particular helper method? When we call this helper method, it will be getFacility over here, and then the input argument will just be Jim, right? It's going to be passed over. So this will be simply just Jim. So that means every occurrence of name will also be Jim. So this is checking to see if the name of the facility will match, right? That's also Jim. And the context object over here, you can see it will be hyang over here. You can see when we call this method here, the context object. So that means when we use this the first time, every occurrence of this, specifically over here, is going to be replaced by Jim. Oh, sorry, replaced by hyang. Okay, so it will be hyang over here. Right? It will be the context object. Yeah. All right. So now let's see how we can actually trace this particular method over here. Right? So the first one, facility F is simply pointing to null. Okay, you can think about F is basically some reference variable that's local, and then we simply declare that somewhere. And F initially is simply just pointing to null. That's what we have over here, right? You know what? Let me put F maybe a little bit at the bottom there, right? Let me just put it there. So you can think about F is really just pointing to null in the beginning. Okay. Eventually, it is going to point to the facility object with the input name Jim. Okay. All right, and then we have this Boolean variable has found, right? And then initially it's simply just false, and then we're going to execute this particular for loop. Okay, and I'm not going to really trace that in much detail. That's something we did previously already when we talk about loops. But I can point out to you the important stuff over here. You can see this has been already replaced by hyang over here, the context objects. So what we need to know is about this particular expression. Let me just highlight it. So this particular expression over here, that might be worth our attention to trace to analyze it. Okay, I'll write it down over here. You can think about in this particular iteration, I'm going to say star over here. Star. Okay, so the star is actually going to be hyang, the context objects dot facilities. And for the very first iteration, it's going to be 0, right? You can see I over here. So it's going to be 0 in this particular iteration. And then later on, it's going to be 1 and also 2. Maximum is going to be 2 because NLF is simply just 3 over here. All right, and then it's going to be dot get name. And then dot equals. It's quite a complicated expression over here. You can see we got multiple dots, but it's not too bad actually. Okay, so this will be Jim over here. All right, let's now try to analyze this this expression over here. You can see we got dot here, we got dot here, we got dot here. I got 3 dots. Okay, let's just try one by one. Okay, understand one by one. Hyang is referring to this variable here. When we say dot, we're following the address and we can trace to this particular objects, and then go to facilities, which is the attributes storing the starting address of this particular array. And then you go to index 0. Index 0 is over here, and then you say dot. So that means you're going to follow this particular arrow, and then you go to this facility object over here, right? So far, so good. and then you're going to call getName. And getName, which I didn't include its code, but it's quite trivial. You can look up your definition in the Eclipse. getName is going to return this particular string object over here, right? And that's referring to spinning class. All right. So up to now, we actually figure out it should be spinning class. Okay. So hopefully you're okay so far. Let me just document our progress so far. You can think about basically up to over here, the orange part, right? So this part, let me just make it a little bit to the left over here, right? You can see there is still a dot over here. Okay, I'll just make sure. Okay, and the orange part over here is actually going to give you simply just a string value, which is spinning class, and that's something I already explained, right? It's simply just going to be spinning class, spinning class over here, and is spinning class equal to Jim? Apparently it is false, right? You can see that's how we check the if condition over here, right? So apparently it's going to be false. For the first branching condition, it's going to be false. So that means we're gonna bypass this particular body of the if statement, and then we gotta go back to the for loop and do the second iteration. And now when we go back to the for loop for the second time, and now the this context object will still be here. That one doesn't change, and facilities will still be here. But now index should be 1, and then getName.equals, right? So what we will have right now is, rather than so I'm not going to rewrite the line. You can think about rather than 0 over here, it's actually going to be just 1 over here, right? Let me just go over very quickly together with you. Here over here, dot, follow the arrow, and we get to this particular object's facilities, which stores the address of this particular array, the starting address, and then we go to index 1. Index 1 is over here, which stores the address of this particular facility objects. And then we say dot getName, and it's going to return the name of this particular facility, which will refer to Jim. Right? So you can see for this particular one over here, for the when index is equal to 1, so what we will get is we're going to get simply just Jim. And Jim matches the Jim over here, so that will give us true. So that means for the second iteration, we're actually going to get true. And once we get true, we're going to do two things over here. You can see these are the two actions that we're going to take. Okay. So number one, we're going to assign F. We're going to say F is assigned to Hyung, Hyung.facilities at position I. So is currently 1, right? It's currently 1 over here. So let me write it down. We're going to say F is assigned to Hyung over here dot facilities at position 1. All right, let's see how we can execute this. Hyung dot facilities at position 1. Hyung dot facilities at position 1, which is referring to this particular object, right? And now we're going to copy that address into F, which is declared over here, right? So what's going to happen is, let's see that. So F, rather than pointing to null, is now going to point to wherever this object is pointing, wherever the index 1 is pointing to over here. Okay, it's really crucial for you to see this, right? So now F is really pointing to this particular object. So that's the highlights. Okay. So after this, we also have to make sure we set the has found to be true. So this will cause some early exit. So as soon as has found is set to true over here. So what's going to happen is, you can see as part of the state condition over here, has found. So we're only going to stay if it's not the case that we have found. But since have found has set to be true, not true is going to be false. So that means we're going to exit from the loop, right? So we're going to exit from the loop, and then we're simply just going to return, eventually, just return F. Just return F over here. All right, so let's see this. So what's going to happen is, this particular line that we are tracing over here, that one, oh, sorry, not here. So far we're only just doing this particular line over here, right? We're still doing this line. And then you can think about F is basically going to be assigned, this particular, it's going to be assigned this address over here. And there's one thing I want to clarify quickly. Okay, you can see we got F over here, and we also got F over here. However, these two F's, they are simply local variable that are in different scope. This F over here is only within the scope of this particular method, and the F over here is only within the scope of this particular method. So there's no clash. So Java compiler can deal with this very well. So all you need to know is this particular helper method call, which we just traced, is going to return the address to this particular object over here, and then we'll simply assign this address again to F. So you can think about F is simply just over here, right? Okay, you can I just don't need to really get to detail into this, but you can think about F here and F here. They're simply independent, but for now I'm just saying F is just here. All right, and then after we have got F over here, what I can do is let me go on. So now units will just be -1. And what about F? Is F pointing to null? So F is simply not pointing to null, right? So that means this will be true. So that means I'm going to execute this particular part over here, and then F dot. So F dot. So I'm going to get to this facility objects, and then get units is going to give me 2. So that's why eventually I'm going to return 2 over here. Okay, so when you return units, it's going to be 2. So ultimately, this particular line that we are really tracing is going to return 2 back to us. So that is why when you do the assertion over here, you can see this assertion here, assert equals 2 will be equal to the units. All right, hopefully you're following this. All right, and then the other two calls will be very similar. I don't need to really repeat all the details, but let me just walk you with that very quickly. So now when we try to do the next line, when we say extendFacilityUnits and then Jim and then 2, what's going to happen now? So we are going to basically call. We're actually going to call. I think let me just use green. We're going to call this particular extendFacilities method over here. And then we're still going to say name will be Jim, and also units will be 2 over here, and the context object will be Hyung over here. So every occurrence of this is going to be replaced by Hyung, right? And now when we actually try to step into this particular call over here, it's going to be just similar to what I just said. So I don't need to repeat. So you can just rewind back to the past 10 or 15 minutes. That's exactly how I trace it. So what's going to happen is this particular F, I simply deliberately choose the same name. You can think about this F is pretty much like this F over here. It's going to now point to just this object, just the same object, because we're passing the same name over here. And then because it's simply not equal to null, so I'm going to set its units over here, right? So you can see this one here, we're going to set the units, and then what's f.getUnits currently? So f.getUnits currently is simply 2, and then plus how many? 2. So you're going to change that to 4. So now this part here, rather than 2, is now going to be 4, all right? And then if you try the next call over here, if you try the next one, we're going to say getFacilityUnits Jim. So this part here will be exactly the same as how I traced it before. So we're just going to call this getFacility over here. Oh, sorry. We're going to call the getFacilityUnits over here for the second time. Okay, let me just use a different color, right? So let's say that's orange. So we're going to call this method for the second time over here, and then we're going to follow just the same tracing logic, and then eventually it's going to return back to you about this particular value, right? It's going to be 4, so that's why it will match. And then if you also follow through the tracing for get payment due, so now how do we do it, right? You're going to go over the array, right? And then you're going to say 2.5 times 1 plus 2.0 times 4 right now, and also plus 1.5 times 3. So that's how you get to the final answer. All right, guys. I think that's just enough details for you. I think it's really important for you to see, number one, when you call the helper method, having this context object this over here will definitely help you trace. That's number one. And number two, when you got actually separate local variable that with the same name, don't just get confused, because Java compiler, they will be able to tell this is the f from this particular method, and this is the f from this particular method, and this is the f from just another method. But for convenience, I'll simply just say f, since I chose the same name. But I can think about at runtime, they will be separate f's, just different aliases to the same object, basically. But they're still pointing to the same objects. All right, so that's about the tracing for for these three methods. Let me go back to the debugger. Okay, I just want to show you one more thing. Okay, so here we are in the getFacilityUnits here, and then I can simply say step into. And now if I say step into over here, I can also try to say step into and getFacility, right? If I try that over here, okay, you can see now I'm now in the getFacility, and then I want to make sure I can find that particular facility objects. You can see the name right now is actually Jim, right? And if you look at this, what's this? This is Hyung, the context object. You can see the name over here is simply Hyung, and then we want to know, we want to find out in this loop. And let's just try that very quickly. Remember, the first object over here wouldn't match. The first object here is simply spinning class. It wouldn't match. But the second object will be Jim, which will match. Let's remember that. Let's now go to the first iteration. And now for the first iteration, let's do some expression check over here. So I can simply just copy this expression over here, and then I can simply just copy. I already analyzed this expression to explain to you what it means already. Okay. So if I do that, it's going to be spinning class, right? Spinning class basically is the string over here, spinning class, and that one equals name should be false, right? You can also expand the expression over here to try, okay? But you already got the idea. And now if I say step over, I'm gonna simply bypass this particular part and then go back to the beginning of the loop to check, okay? And you can see has found variable is still false, right? So now let's go on to the second iteration. And for the second iteration, you can see, go back to expressions here. You can see now the name we're talking about is really the Jim over here, right? So now we're talking about a second object over here whose name is Jim. And then we're simply going to, and Jim equals Jim. You can see name over here is also Jim. So that will be true. So we're going to go into this particular, these two lines, the body of the if statement. So we're going to go that and do that. All right. After these two lines, you can see has found will be set to be true. So that means not has found will be true, not has found will be false. So that means we don't really get to the loop anymore. If I say step over again, what's going to happen? We're going to bypass the body of the loop and then simply exit. Step over, right? You can see now we can return F, right? And then go there. Okay, and then you can see, so now we are here. So now we are right at the end of calling this particular utility method. If I say step over, you can see now F is really assigning, F is now assigned to the facility over here. More specifically, F is now assigned to the facility with the target name, which is Jim. You can see Jim matches Jim. And you can do the rest. Okay, it's not equal to null, so we're going to assign the units. So what will be the units is going to be 2, right? And then the units variable over here will just be 2, right? That's basically what we have set already in the tracing on the paper. All right, so that's about this line here, and then you can also do the rest by stepping into and also try to convince yourself that we really got consistent tracing behavior compared with the paper. Let me stop here and then switch back to the Java perspective. Okay, over here. All right, so that will be the end of this example I would like to talk about for the fitness club. I think that will be about what I would like to discuss about object-oriented programming in Java. So we have done quite a bit of methods in the past 3 weeks about introducing OOP, and also to do gradually about reference type attributes versus single valued versus multi-value. So please review all the details. I think we have covered quite much in the past 3 weeks. And starting from next week, we're going to see how you can apply the OOP you have learned so far into the context of mobile app developments, whose model part is exactly the model part we have been speaking about. All right, I'll see you next week and review the basics for OOP all the stuff we talk about, and then we'll learn about how you can develop a mobile app in Android Studio next week.